Right now, McDonald's is preparing to cut hundreds of jobs. The company announcing it's closing U.S. corporate offices through Wednesday.
The company has also temporarily shut down corporate offices to do the deed, meaning some employers, or employees rather, will learn they are getting laid off from home.
For some of America's fast food giants, their customers are cutting back on spending because the price of dining out has increased nearly 4% over the past year.
A daily routine for so many, a breakfast sandwich there, a salad to go there. But now, as their budgets are ballooning, more people are making food at home or even skipping out on meals altogether.
The Golden Arches have stood for decades as a symbol of American prosperity and global reach. They represented something beyond hamburgers and French fries. They represented a system that worked, a model that delivered affordable food to working families while generating billions in profit for shareholders. That system is now collapsing in real time, and the speed of the collapse has stunned even the harshest critics of American trade policy. Nobody predicted this would happen so fast. This is a story about what happens when political decisions collide with economic reality, when tariffs designed to protect American workers end up destroying American jobs, when a company that survived recessions and pandemics finds itself unable to survive its own government. McDonald's just announced something that would have seemed impossible 12 months ago. 12,000 restaurants closed across the country. Tens of thousands of workers terminated without warning. Billions in revenue evaporating faster than anyone projected. The most recognizable brand in American fast food is fighting for survival. The announcement came from Chicago headquarters with language carefully chosen to avoid panic. Executives delivered prepared statements that acknowledged difficulty while projecting confidence in eventual recovery. But the markets understood immediately what the words actually meant. Shares collapsed within hours as investors fled positions. Lawsuits began piling up against both the company and federal authorities. The arches that once symbolized stability now symbolize something far more troubling. The crisis traces directly to a single policy decision made in Washington. When the White House signed the America First 2.0 order in March 2025, it triggered the most aggressive tariff campaign in modern American history. Imports from Canada and Mexico faced immediate 25% levies. Threats of tariffs reaching 145% followed within weeks. These numbers looked abstract on policy documents circulated through government offices. They became devastating in practice when businesses attempted to maintain operations. Canada responded within days with precision targeting. A 25% tariff landed on $30 billion worth of American goods. Beef, cheese, and dairy products that American farmers depended on selling northward suddenly faced barriers that made trade uneconomical. The retaliation was designed to inflict maximum political pain. The European Union followed with its own $28 billion package targeting American agricultural exports. Decades of carefully constructed trade relationships fractured simultaneously across multiple continents. The interconnected system that had delivered prosperity began tearing itself apart faster than anyone anticipated. For McDonald's, the mathematics became impossible almost overnight. Nearly 70% of the company's beef, cheese, and frozen potato supply depended on imports crossing borders that now carried massive tariff penalties. The just-in-time delivery system that had functioned flawlessly for decades could not survive tariff barriers of this magnitude. Beef prices surged as supplies contracted under trade restrictions. Domestic ground beef climbed 43% higher than levels from 5 years earlier. The cost increases rippled through every ingredient that made the menu possible. Cheese, potatoes, packaging materials. Even the paper cups holding soft drinks faced dramatic price increases. Lamb Weston, the potato processor supplying billions of servings of fries annually, raised prices by nearly 25% to offset tariff costs. Production output dropped 8% in the first quarter alone. The company that had reliably delivered frozen potatoes for generations could no longer maintain volume at prices McDonald's could absorb. Packaging materials faced their own crisis. Paper and plastic products crossing the border now carried 25% tariffs that pushed final costs up by half. Items that purchasing managers once treated as trivial line items became significant budget problems requiring executive attention. These increases destroyed the foundation of McDonald's most important competitive weapon, the value menu. The dollar offerings that attracted working-class families for decades depended on razor-thin margins maintained through astronomical volume. When input costs rose past 10%, the cushion disappeared entirely. By early 2025, wholesale food prices were already running 35% higher than pre-pandemic levels. The profits vanished before a burger reached the customer's tray. Every sale became a loss. Every transaction drained resources rather than building them. The fundamental business model stopped functioning. The internal sales reports confirmed what executives feared privately. Same-store sales across the United States dropped 3.6% in a single quarter. The steepest decline since pandemic lockdowns forced restaurants to close entirely. Discount promotions that once reliably drove traffic no longer worked because the costs behind those promotions had outpaced revenue growth at nearly double the rate. The first visible surrender came when the dollar menu disappeared entirely from locations nationwide. Input costs had climbed 35% since 2019. Beef, cheese, potatoes, and paper packaging had all surged by a third over 5 years. The mathematics no longer supported affordable pricing regardless of volume. For millions of American families, McDonald's had always represented the fallback option when paychecks fell short. The place where kids could eat without destroying the weekly budget. That option ceased to exist when value items vanished from menu boards across the country. Revenue from value offerings dropped 18% within 2 months, a number that would have seemed catastrophic in normal times. These were not normal times. These were unprecedented conditions. Facing a business model that could no longer function under current conditions, McDonald's leadership unveiled a controversial survival strategy, Project Golden Arch Exit. The plan centered on shutting down 6 American processing plants and relocating significant production capacity overseas to countries unaffected by American tariff policy. Vietnam and Brazil emerged as primary destinations for relocated production. The Brazilian meat giant JBS committed $100 million to construct facilities in Vietnam focused on beef, poultry, and pork processing. Much of this production would eventually return to supply McDonald's American operations through routes that avoided domestic tariffs entirely. The strategy offered a path around trade barriers while accessing lower-cost labor markets unavailable domestically. It positioned the company within international supply networks that American policy was increasingly excluding itself from. Survival required abandoning the domestic supply chain that had defined the brand for generations. The risks embedded in this approach were substantial and immediate. McDonald's had built its reputation on speed and consistency delivered through domestic operations, fresh ingredients arriving within days, reliable quality across thousands of locations. That system depended on proximity between production and consumption that offshore manufacturing could not replicate. Shifting operations to South America and Southeast Asia introduced complications that domestic sourcing never faced. Long-haul shipping across oceans lasting weeks rather than days. Complex logistics spanning multiple countries and time zones. Countless points where failure could occur without warning. A temperature deviation during storage. A delay at a congested port. A storm blocking shipping lanes for days. Any disruption could render entire shipments worthless. The extended supply chain made consistency harder to guarantee, while threatening consumer trust in food quality and safety. For a brand built entirely on reliability, any slip carried consequences beyond the immediate incident. Trust accumulated over decades could evaporate through a single contamination scare or quality failure that made national headlines. The theoretical risks became concrete reality across the American Midwest. From Iowa to Ohio, restaurants began closing or reducing hours as supplies ran thin. Iowa faced particular devastation as a key potato processing hub serving regional distribution networks. Workers who had supported those networks for years lost jobs and scrambled toward lower-paying alternatives. Government data documented more than 24,000 food processing workers nationwide losing jobs or having hours reduced in the first quarter, an 18% increase over the previous year. For employees and franchisees, the collapse represented daily reality rather than abstract statistics. Lost paychecks, empty dining rooms, communities watching anchor employers disappear. The broader implications extended beyond any single company or industry. A tariff structure threatening to reach 145% on agricultural imports and 25 to 50% on packaging materials was suffocating an industry operating on margins, barely reaching 5%. That mathematics made profitability nearly impossible under current conditions. Every burger coming off the grill represented financial loss rather than gain. The offshore production plan was less bold strategy than desperate survival measure, forced by circumstances beyond corporate control. Competitors moved aggressively to exploit the opening McDonald's vulnerability created. Wendy's launched combo deals priced nearly 10% below previous levels. Burger King introduced a $2.99 Whopper targeting price-conscious consumers directly. KFC unveiled discounted family menus aimed at households stretching every dollar further. While rivals attacked, McDonald's found itself paralyzed between preserving product quality and assembling an untested international supply chain. Neither option offered clear advantage. Both carried substantial risk. The cost reality remained inescapable, regardless of strategic adjustments. Making every burger, pouring every drink, serving every order of fries had become significantly more expensive under tariff pressure. Washington continued promoting policies framed around bringing jobs home, while those same policies destroyed the low-cost model that kept fast food accessible for generations. The deeper question extended beyond corporate survival into fundamental policy debate. The ideal of American manufacturing carried genuine emotional resonance for millions of citizens. But current conditions forced examination of how that ideal balanced against consumer needs that working families depended upon daily. When affordable meals vanish, working families face impossible choices. Spend more than budgets reasonably allow, or accept lower quality alternatives that fail to satisfy. Inflation had already pushed grocery bills to record levels. Fast food served as the fallback for millions of households. That safety net was disappearing precisely when families needed it most. McDonald's leadership poured every available resource into cost reduction, tariff avoidance, and reputation protection. Yet risks surrounded every decision. A supply chain disruption, another tariff escalation, an unexpected policy reversal. Any development could transform survival strategy into collapse trajectory without warning. The question now facing observers is straightforward but uncomfortable. If McDonald's, with global reach and deep financial resources, cannot withstand this shock, what happens to smaller businesses facing identical pressures? How many processing plants relocate overseas? How many farms lose their primary customers? How many communities watch employers disappear? The arches that represented American prosperity for generations now represent something else entirely. A warning about what happens when policy ambitions collide with economic systems that millions of people depend upon for daily survival. The consequences are only beginning to unfold, and they will extend far beyond any single company or any single industry. Subscribe now for continued coverage as this situation develops. Your engagement keeps these critical stories visible,